Welcome back into the Dead Arm Sports Podcast, coming at you live on a Wednesday. Josh and Jell here, coming at you a day late. Want to pay our respects and just didn't feel that it would be right to do the podcast yesterday with not knowing the situation with Damar Hamlin. Just out of respect for him and wish him all the best in his recovery, which looks like it's going to be a long road and hopefully goes in a positive direction here in the coming days. But just absolutely unprecedented, treacherous injury on Monday nights, went into cardiac arrest on the field, had to be taken to the hospital, and is still, as of Wednesday night when we're recording here, still in critical condition, breathing tube. And again, we don't have a whole lot of information at this time, but just want to pay our respects to him, his family, Buffalo Bills organization, wish him all the best. Thoughts and prayers are with him. And yeah, I don't really even know how to put into words what had happened on Monday night. Kick it over to you, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wouldn't have felt right to record on our typical Tuesday, just not knowing anything. I mean, and at this point we're recording on a Wednesday night rather than, like you said, our typical Tuesday, but we did get at least some encouraging news today, and it made it just feel a little bit more comfortable, I guess, than to, obviously we try to bring you entertainment. We try to bring you fun. We try to bring you spin on sports. We try to be an upbeat show and, get as many, try to bring laughs into the show, whether it's just inside jokes with me and Josh laughing, but we try to bring a little bit of entertainment into the listeners' lives. And yesterday, just not knowing the impact of or the the outcome of anything Damar Hamlin related, just didn't feel. I don't think I could have muscled up and done an episode. I'm sure you feel the same, Josh, that it just wouldn't have felt right. And a lot of times, I guess, to make the stupid analogy of, we didn't want to play hurt, when in football, that's oftentimes the job, is for you to go out there and play hurt. But this was clearly a different situation. You saw all the emotion, the extremely raw emotion from every Bill out there, a number of Bengals. Josh Allen looked like, he had just, woken up from seeing a ghost. I mean, he was just, the look on his face was thankfully something he had never seen before. And I'm sure that situation was something that nobody had ever wanted to see. But as a viewer myself, we, just watching on ESPN, we had no idea what was going on for a long time. And, ESPN went to multiple commercial breaks before they gave a true update. And for me, when it really hit me, and, I just got chills just kind of thinking back to hearing Joe Buck saying they were performing CPR for over the last 9 minutes on Damar Hamlin. And that's something that thankfully we've never heard on the football field. Hopefully something we never have to hear again and go through again. Hopefully none of these players, none of their family members have to ever go through or experience that again, because just hearing that from Joe Buck, it made it seem like, we've gone through countless, we've been football fans for multiple decades now. We've seen everything that we thought you would see on a football field, which is, as nasty as Ryan Shazier being paralyzed from the neck down, or from the waist down, but he was at least able to give a thumbs up. Every time that we see that stretcher come out, you always get a thumbs up. And we didn't get to see that thumbs up this time. And it was just straight into the ambulance and straight back to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. and, where he's been getting round the clock treatment, been in the ICU ever since. And, but yeah, like you mentioned, we did get some positive news today where he's not breathing 100% reliant on a ventilator like he had been. And, now it's down to 50%. So he's breathing 50% on his own. Obviously, the hope is that he gets to 100% on his own. They can get him off that medicine where, basically keeps you asleep, and he can make a full recovery. The positive news here, it's obviously nothing related to what happened on the field, but the amount of support financially for Damar Hamlin's toy drive has now surpassed $6 million in donations through his GoFundMe. His original goal with that GoFundMe was to reach $2,500. Before this injury, it was at $74,000. So he had already way surpassed that goal. But now for it to be up above 6 million, and maybe by the time we're done recording, or by the time that this podcast reaches all your ears, or for your YouTube viewers reaches your eyes, maybe we're talking about $10 million that's been donated. So there's a lot of good that, assuming Hamlin is able to recover in full, there's a lot of good that his family can do with this, set up a foundation to not only have this be a holiday toy drive, but to help other people in need, whether that's children that have maybe gone through similar things, any number of different things. And, just helping the poor in general, helping the needy in general, in not just a financial way, but also an emotional and a support way. And that's, it's this country we've obviously seen over the last 6, 7, 8 years has been just about as divided as it's been in my life. But it's amazing what can happen when tragedy occurs, and we all come together, and we all come together in support and in love. And that's the one positive, obviously, I think that can come out of this, is it shows that as much as we like to bicker about the little things, when big things matter, we can become a legitimate, one family nationwide. And that's just kind of powerful to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, our thoughts, prayers just go out to Damar Hamlin and his family and Bill's organization, and to Damar himself, and hopefully a very speedy recovery. And hopefully we have some new updates and some positive updates next time we record next week. So with that, he can be found at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out on Facebook at Dead Arm Sports. Go to YouTube, type in Dead Arm Sports into that search bar. Will be the first thing that pops up. Make sure you subscribe, click the bell. We monitor that chat that is on the right-hand side, so that way you can go ahead and ask us any questions there. If you miss out on asking us questions there, we can be found at Dead Arm Sports on our social media. You can hit us up there, or on our individual socials. Gel can be found at DasGel. That's at DASJEL. I can be found at DasJPEC. That's at DASJPEC. Send us in any questions there. Subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Send us a screenshot. We will get you some sticker swag sent out in the mail. All right, Gel. We had one heck of a college weekend of bowl games, and I want to just not even beat around the bush here. Let's get right into those college football playoff semifinals, and I can safely say that was the best semifinals combined we have ever seen in the fairly short history of the college football playoff. But
we're what?
Just two epic games, just under 10 seasons.
Almost a decade and a half, 13 years-ish?
Yeah.
2010-ish? Right. Does that sound right?
Yep.
So, yeah, like you said, this was by a mile the best, most entertaining two semifinals paired back to back that I've ever seen. Going into Sunday, I was almost, those games were on Saturday. Going into Sunday, I was like almost footballed out. I'm like, there's no way that Sunday's going to get any better than this, because these two games were so freaking awesome. First game, Michigan TCU to kick off this 2 sets. TCU ends up getting the pretty big upsets. Definitely a game that we both were on the side of the Wolverines on, thinking that Michigan was just going to completely out physical TCU, but you had a nice little nugget there, and I'll let you toot your own horn about, what Michigan couldn't let happen.
Yeah, I had said in that preview episode leading up to this game, the Ohio State game, the Purdue game in the Big Ten Championship, Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan has historically been coming out extremely slow in that first half. And that's not something you could do against TCU, who was the heavy underdog going into that game. And they gave TCU, they gave Max Duggan, they gave them all a ton of confidence. TCU's defense was fired up. They had a pick 6 there in the first half, and just they were going into that second half saying, all right, we're right in this. We have them where we want them. We can compete with the big boys. Everyone was doubting us, have a chip on our shoulder, and they came out and punched Michigan in the mouth in that first half, and it ended up holding on. Again, it got close down the stretch, and we can get into, I'm sure we'll talk about the last couple plays of the game or the last drive, but I mean, TCU played an all around just fantastic game in all phases of it. And that was without their starting tailback too. Kendry Miller went down with an injury, backup running backs in the game, and Quentin Johnson had a heck of a game as well. And just, I mean, a fantastic performance all around from TCU in this one.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I want to give TCU all the props in the world, they won the first and the second quarter, went into the second half with a 21-6 lead. But what gave me a little bit of doubt was that Michigan was still able to move the ball, just weren't able to convert on some of those drives. And ta-da, their first drive of the game, nothing ball game, 4th and goal. First, yeah, like I said, Michigan's first drive of the game, off of a timeout, they try a Philly special, the old double reverse pass back to the quarterback. You know when that play works? When the defense is caught off guard. They ran that after a timeout when Sonny Dykes, when that defensive coordinator, that whole defense can rally and say, contain, look out for this tricky BS kind of stuff, because how many times have we seen the Philly special run just since Philly ran in the Super Bowl? It's like, this play needs to be retired. It's been run so much now that it's no longer creative, and to be running it just when the message to your team that if you're Harbaugh, the message you want to send to your team and the message that you want to send to TCU is, we are the dominant physical team here. We don't need to be flashy and run weird stuff. We're just more physical. We're more dominant. We're the better team. And we're at the 2-yard line and we're going to run this ball down your throat. And instead they call a Philly special after a timeout. It doesn't, if you're going to do that, run a hurry up Philly special. If you're going to do that way, maybe the defense is a little out of sync and maybe there's one guy that's supposed to be out wide over there that's lined up on the other side of the field or in the middle or something. That's the only way that play's gonna work. You can't call that play after taking a timeout. Like, if you were to just caption that play as simple, just put it simply as how not to run the Philly special, because and I feel like that was, that missed opportunity that gave TCU all the momentum that they needed. And then they just marched down the field on their drive. They went 98 and they put up 7. And it was kind of like, okay, now Michigan's kind of playing on their heels. Like they're playing defensive. because they just got the ball down to the 2. They did nothing with it. And then their defense just got smooshed. So I think that was just the play call was pathetic. It's not something that you should do if you're the more dominant team. The reason that it worked for the Philadelphia Eagles is because it was the first time it had been run, like at least, recently that I can remember. And it was Nick Foles out there, not a very athletic JJ McCarthy, who McCarthy's known to be running around. I'm sure that they already had a spy on him anyways, because he is a mobile quarterback. There's always going to be somebody with their eyes on JJ McCarthy. There wasn't anybody's eyes on Nick Foles. Nick Foles isn't like little, Michael Vick running around out there. You don't need to spy Nick Foles. You do need to put somebody's eyes on JJ McCarthy. So the entire concept of that play, plus doing it after a timeout, it's like, that was just a complete failure. I feel like that really kind of set the tone for the rest of that game. It's just don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, and then was it the drive or the second drive right after that, Michigan as well? I mean, it was a very questionable call that JJ McCarthy threw that bomb touchdown pass that ended up getting overturned and knocked down at the half-yard line or whatever it was, which I don't agree with the call. But then was it the very next play, 2 plays later, ended up fumbling the ball. TCU recovers on a botched handoff, and you could just feel the momentum shift at that point in time too. You thought Michigan had a little bit back with the touchdown, have a little bit of air let out of their sails with it getting called back, but
a ton of air let out.
Still at the goal line though, thinking you're going to punch it in for a touchdown and get right back in the game, only to turn the ball over, and TCU marches down, scores again on that drive. So just a mind-boggling start to Michigan again, with the starting off on that first drive with the play calling and then having a little bit of bad luck, bad fortune on the next drive. But it just was not the start that Michigan needed. And you could kind of see the writing on the wall with that. And that Michigan's a second half team, but it looked like it was going to be too much for them to overcome, which essentially it ended up being.
Really shows the benefit there of Blake Corum with him not being active in this game. I mean, what a mistake that the Heisman committee made by not bringing him to New York and instead bringing in Stetson Bennett. I mean, I get Stetson Bennett had a good season, but did anybody really think that he had a shot at that was even close to Heisman worthy? I don't think so. So it just showed the value of Blake Corum there. But I guess going beyond that, JJ McCarthy, 5-star recruit, really high-end quarterback coming in to Michigan, had a little bit of a slow start, couldn't even beat out Caden McNamara for the first 2 years. And going into this season, it was a 50-50 job. We saw McNamara start week 1, JJ McCarthy started week 2, and then it was McCarthy's job from there on. But when we watched Michigan play, McNamara was really never that impressive until that Ohio State game where he played his ass off. He had the game of his life. I know I had a lot of really good things to say about McCarthy after that Ohio State game, previewing this game, because I kind of started to believe in the guy, thinking finally he's almost come out of his shell a little bit and showed everybody this is why I'm hot. But God, he laid a massive egg in this game. And it makes me wonder, he started getting a little bit of steam of somebody, hey, keep an eye on him for the NFL draft coming up. Is he off your draft board at this point? I mean, I know we're talking, he's still got another year in college before he's even eligible, but God, it's been a really shaky college career outside of that Ohio State game. And this was his mark to make, where it's like, this is my team. We have the second best team in college football per the rankings. And I was no Blake Corum, so this is my team to lead. I'm going to do this. And then he just wet the bed. If I'm an NFL scout, I mean, I don't know if I'm totally hands off unless he really balls out next year, I have to be hands off because he has not done enough. He hasn't played impressively enough for me to even think about taking him in the draft, which you wouldn't have thought out of a 5-star recruit.
Yeah, just inconsistent play all year from him. And again, this was his time to shine. Michigan looked like they were going to bounce back and get revenge on that early exit last year in the college football playoff and ended up getting knocked out again this year. But JJ McCarthy, yes, I think he needs to have a huge bounce back season next year in order to get his stock back up, because right now it's as low as it has been in the last little bit. And it also makes me wonder too, I think this is a good time to talk about Jim Harbaugh a little bit too, and what the future maybe with JJ McCarthy is after this season. We've already had some rumors out there about Jim Harbaugh talking with the owner of the Carolina Panthers about the job opening there. Rumors that Denver has inquired on him as well. I mean, every single season, this just keeps popping up. And is this the right time for Jim Harbaugh to maybe make that jump back to the NFL? For me, it is. I think he has beat Ohio State the last 2 years. His stock is pretty high right now. He seems to have taken Michigan about as far as they can go. I mean, 2 back-to-back college football playoffs, and we're going to have that expansion in a couple of years, but I think he'll be gone. Even if he's not this year, he'll be gone by the time it expands. But I do think this is the right time for Jim to make that jump into the NFL. He's probably going to be looking for the right situation with him having a nice comfy chair at Michigan. He's kind of got the leverage in the situation. But do you think he's going to jump to the NFL this year?
I think you said it. His stock is, I don't know if his stock is ever, it's certainly never been higher than it is right now, at least in terms of his success at Michigan. Like you said, beating Ohio State twice this last year, or I guess this season at the shoe. Like it's one thing when you win at Ann Arbor once, people could look at that as a fluke. No, he did it 2 years in a row, both at home, at the Big House, and this past year at the shoe, and in a pretty dominant fashion this year. So I think I don't know if his stock could ever be higher. Let's say Blake Corum dips out. I feel like we may have seen the ceiling of JJ McCarthy. I mean, I hate to say that already, but we saw him. I'm scared that Ohio State game was his peak. There's going to be other departures on that defense. It's 2 college football playoffs in a row. That both Denver and Carolina's owners that's money bags right there. Like those are 2. I mean, Denver's owned by the Waltons, like unlimited amount of money. They could hire Jim Harbaugh, give him $20 million a year, and I bet they make that $20 million in 1 day of profit with Walmart. I mean, like that, they could do that. So and Dave Tepper also with Carolina. I mean, he was just able to, it might as well have been a tax write-off for him to, write out Matt Rule's contract. So, I mean, or to, wipe out his contract off the books. So I think it's probably smart for Harbaugh to jump. The problem is where to go, because you go to Denver, you're stuck with Russell Wilson. The Broncos, that ownership group can have as much money as they want, but there's no way to get out of that Russell Wilson contract. You can't it's not like paying out a CEO to, you sign a CEO to a deal like Russell Wilson's and, okay, well, we'll just write it off. We'll just, sign this massive check to you and you go away. Can't do that in the NFL. Russell Wilson's going to count against those books against the free agent, the cap number for the next 4 years. So you can't just write that off. Carolina, there obviously is no QB unless you're still somehow hanging on to Sam Darnold by a thread. If you are, you're a fool. So they don't have a quarterback. They've won too many games to be at the top of the draft to go grab themselves a Bryce Young, a CJ Stroud. I want to get into him in a little bit, a Will Levis type. So they don't really have a quarterback. They're in this kind of middling situation where they almost ended up winning the division, and then they lost until they blew a big lead to Tampa this past weekend. I like those two jobs aren't that appealing to me if I'm Jim Harbaugh. And if, I floated this idea out this is pretty much right when Frank Reich was canned. I said, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Irsay said, former Colt, Jim Harbaugh, why don't you come on over? But that situation sucks too. You, again, don't have a quarterback. Now, it's not often that you walk into an NFL job with the perfect situation where there is an established quarterback in place. But, at the same time, we saw Harbaugh walk into the Niners back when he got hired by San Fran, and everybody thought Alex Smith was a bust. And he turned Alex Smith and that Niner team into a really formidable team. So maybe he's able to do that same thing in Denver with Russell Wilson and turn Russell Wilson into maybe an Alex Smith game manager type rather than somebody that we're relying 100% on the offense or 100% of the offense on the quarterback. That's probably the best position or the best situation for Harbaugh that's out there. But I think you kind of have to jump if you're Harbaugh at this point, especially if you're seeing $20 million+ offers per season.
Yeah, I think another one that could be interesting too is if the Houston job were to open up and they move on from Lovie Smith, have the number one pick in the draft, he could walk in, have the quarterback that he wants to lead the franchise with, and have his pick on it. And we've seen in the past, granted, there is a lot of dysfunction in Houston with their ownership group, but they have given the reins over to Bill O'Brien in the past to have him kind of be that general manager role. Maybe, hopefully they learned their lesson from that the last time, but maybe they tell Jim that, hey, we'll give you a little bit more authority when it comes to your personnel choices, and just kind of make him an offer that he can't refuse. And that could be a job that is a little bit interesting. Another one that is interesting too is if the Chargers have an early exit in the playoffs. Maybe they've seen enough from Brandon Staley and think that, oh, hey, Jim Harbaugh, he might be the one to come in and unlock Justin Herbert's full potential. We've seen the last couple of years with Justin Herbert being an awesome quarterback, but just their offense hasn't taken the next step. And maybe an offensive mind like Jim Harbaugh can come into the Chargers and roll from there. But we'll see what ends up happening there. Time-wise, Joe, we got another game to talk about here too. Georgia survives against Ohio State. And I like to use the word survives because I honestly think Ohio State was the better team in this matchup. Ryan Day outcoached Kirby Smart, and it came down to just an absolute shankopotamus of a field goal at the end of the game, which no fault to the kicker. I mean, that was a tough situation. No fault to the kicker? That's a tough situation to kick in, though.
Okay. Where else do you place the blame?
I mean, they could have gotten him a little bit closer to the field goal post.
Okay, that's fair, but you can't blame the whole. And if you blame the moment, then he wasn't built for the moment, and then you blame the kicker. I get that was obviously a mad high pressure situation, but we can't be. I don't think it's fair for us to say, "Hey, pay the players," and then hold them to no expectation. That's just me. So sorry, I didn't want to. Sorry for cutting you off, but no. I had to because
I understand that you can't
blame anybody else.
It's his job to make, but they let up a ton, and that is a heck of a field goal for a college kicker to make. Not only in that situation, but I mean, what was the crowd? 70% Georgia fans. It's in Atlanta.
It was in their home stadium.
It was a tough situation for him. He lined up and I knew it probably was not going to go in, but I did not think it would be that bad. Let me just say that. But
if he would have missed a little bit, like if it was a respectable miss, then it's like, okay, he just, it's a long kick. He just missed it, and he just, he missed. We see NFL kickers miss kicks all the time. But that moment was clearly out of, I mean, he clearly couldn't, and it was a long kick. I bet. And as you said, Ohio State would have done him a ton of favors if they could have gotten him another 15 yards. And if that's a 35-yard kick, I bet that kicker's like, hey, I do this in practice all the time. Now you're talking about 50-yarder. Oh, shit, I got to kick this as hard as I can. And then he, sends it into Narnia. So I mean, I get that, but you can't take all the blame off the kicker for the moment. That's his moment, man. That's his moment. Vinatieri never had the biggest leg, but
Clutch
he made
City.
every clutch kick he needed to.
Someone who was clutch in this game was CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud, I thought, had an unbelievable performance and probably the best performance of the 4 quarterbacks that we saw in the playoffs. I mean, Stetson Bennett came through when the moment mattered down the stretch in the 4th quarter, but he did not look very good up until that point at all. But CJ Stroud, granted, I know we were texting back and forth in this one, Shell. His wide receivers were fairly open, but I mean, he was hitting them in stride. He was making the throws when he needed to and extending plays when he needed to. So I gained quite a bit of respect for CJ Stroud in this one. I mean, we know the history of the Ohio State quarterback position. It's just, all right, next person up, and they're usually really awesome. But he, to me, looked like he could possibly be a franchise quarterback down the road if he gets into the right situation in this one. I mean, he's got a big arm. He would like to see a little bit more mobility, but he showed that he could get out of the pocket and pick up some yards and pick up the first down when he needed to in this one. And against that Georgia defense, which, man, they did not play their best game either. I mean, giving up 40 some points to Ohio State in this one, but again, fantastic game, and gained a lot of respect for CJ in this one, in that loss.
Yeah, I mean, you just touched on it, which was going to kind of be my main point about CJ Stroud was it's so much of that Ohio State offense is scheme the guy open for an easy throw, whether he's open, it could be a bubble screen, it could be, it could be an open slant, it could be somehow this, they schemed where there was a guy running a skinny post and there was a guy running a wheel route. That wheel route is wide open down the sideline because the safety was distracted by that post. So it's just a running back running a wheel route against a linebacker. Linebacker can't catch up to, a Travion Henderson type. And that wheel route's wide open down the field. And all he has to do is make a nice, easy pitch and catch. But but again, that's facing teams like, the Rutgers of the world. A lot of these middling Big Ten teams, but what we saw against Georgia is that Georgia wasn't going to allow that. And Stroud had to make a lot of really nice throws. What we saw, though, that most impressed me and that I think has to be a massive turn on for these scouts, these NFL scouts, is he ran the ball. We hadn't seen that out of him all season where he's running the ball. He ended up having 70 rushing yards if you don't count the negative yards from the sacks that they took, which, by the way, the NCAA absolutely needs to take out sacks. Right. Sacks counting as negative rushing yards for a quarterback. That's the absolute largest amount of garbage in the world. Get rid of that. Now that we're now that we can bet on these games, you can't have that affect a quarterback's rushing numbers. And beyond that, if that quarterback kneels and they lose 2 yards, that doesn't count as negative rushing yards. Where in the NFL, it's the opposite. That does count as negative rushing yards when you take a knee, but it doesn't if you get sacked. It's just, come on, we're in a betting world. We need some standardization there. Also, I'm salty about that because I took the over on Mahomes rushing yards in one of the Super Bowls in that Super Bowl against the
Bucks.
No, they lost. They lost to the. Didn't they lose to the Bucks?
Oh yeah, San Fran.
Yes, I took the over of Mahomes rushing yards, and he nailed it 3 times in a row. And I lost my bet. So I am all sorts of salty about that rule. But 70 rushing yards from Stroud, that's something that we hadn't seen all season. And that just, it's like, that has to make these NFL scouts think when he needs to go. Like, it just shows that he's more athletic, more mobile than we had ever thought. So for me, that solidifies CJ Stroud as at least the number 2 QB in this class. I mean, I'm now at the point where I see the size, I see the arm, I see the mobility. He's, for me, ahead of Levis. And I consider him at 1 just because of what we've seen out of these small quarterbacks and their injuries over these last couple of years, whether it's Tua, Kyler, Russell Wilson this year took his first real big shot and he missed a game and a half when he got, just picked up and thrown down onto his head. Tua, 3 concussions. Kyler he's missed multiple games with a shoulder. Now he's out with an ACL. Granted, the ACL was a non-contact, but small athletes, you can only take so many hits when you're getting bum rushed by 250, 2 people that can run a 4.4 and they're 6'5", 255, and 2 guys that are 320 pounds that could, bench press a school bus. So I think the size matters for CJ Stroud. And I'd be tempted after seeing that performance to look at him at number 1.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you're investing your future at the quarterback position, I think just with what we've seen, like you said, with some of these smaller quarterbacks, that you need to go with the bigger quarterback in this one. And we got to see quite a bit from CJ Stroud. Obviously, we've got 3.5 months, almost 4 to the NFL draft. So we've got the combine, we've got a lot of pro days and everything else where it's probably going to be flipping back and forth quite a bit. And ultimately it's going to come down to the Houston Texans, assuming that they lose this weekend. They'd be idiotic not to tank and get the number 1 pick, but it'll be interesting to see what their thought process is with that. But CJ Stroud, I think, made a huge case for that number 1 quarterback and number 1 overall in this draft with his performance this last weekend, for sure.
And you'll see different mocks. You'll see different all for the next, like you said, we got 4 months. You'll hear it all from us as well. So who our picks are.
Anything else from this one, Joe, before we get into the Cotton Bowl?
I guess just really, really briefly, USC loses to Tulane. USC is up 8. They drop a kick. They drop the kickoff. Ball goes out at the 1. They run 2 straight read options, end up with a safety. Tulane gets it, scores a touchdown, kicks the extra point to go up by 1 with 9 seconds left. The only way that you can lose a game in regulation down 8 is exactly what happened, is a safety and allow a touchdown. There's no other outside of, there were no turnovers. You could throw a pick 6, they could kick an onside, whatever. But how does that happen? That's insane. Why were they running read options at the 1 inside their own 1 in the end zone? Come on, Lincoln. Like I love you, Lincoln. You're a quarterback whisperer. Caleb, Kyler, Baker, Heisman winners. You turn Jalen Hurts from, what some scouts were saying, shit, he might be a good NFL running back, into a 2nd round pick, a Heisman contender, and now potential MVP. Like, props to you, Lincoln Riley, for your quarterback development. But, dude, run the goddamn ball with a running back, or at least run a freaking a QB draw just straight up. You can't be running a read option at the 1 with Tulane having all that momentum. They're trying to fight for their lives here. It just meltdown from USC.
Yeah. And I think my biggest takeaway from this one too is that Lincoln Riley, you mentioned it, quarterback whisperer, offensive guru, Pac-12 You don't really need a defense at all. We've seen that this year outside of Utah shut them down pretty good in that Pac-12 championship game, points wise at least. But he needs to hit that defensive side of the ball if he has any national championship aspirations, because if that team is a sieve like they were this year, they are not going to be getting far at all. And they need to do something there if they want to win a national championship while he's there. My last one I wanted to bring up real quick, Joe, Arkansas, Kansas. This one happened after our last recording, 55-53 in 3 overtimes. And my takeaway from this one, after the second overtime, having to go just 2-point conversion straight up, no drives,
So
nothing,
dumb.
the fucking dumbest thing college football ever did. Okay, maybe during the regular season you do that. Don't do that in a bowl game. No one wants to see just teams going for 2-point conversions and the whole game coming down to that. That is the dumbest thing in the entire world and just pissed me off.
And if you end up winning that game, how do you even feel proud of yourself? It's like,
right.
Whoa, cool. We converted a 2-point conversion and that's it. Like you said, it's a bowl game, man. Let these kids have fun. Just let it ride out. We can't.
Right.
It's a freaking bowl game. Like, let these kids have fun, man. I get they're all probably tired and whatever, but dude, it's for a lot of these kids, it's their last time on a high stakes football field. These are high end athletes. This isn't freaking peewee football here. A lot of these guys have been playing really high-end football for a really long time. Probably a lot of them are the only player from their high school that got a D1 Scully. And for their careers to end like that, either whether you're the winning team or the losing team, it's like, this kind of feels cheap,
Right. I was wondering too, like when you have to go for the back-to-back 2-point conversions, could you do the old Doug Flutie drop kick for the extra point and just get 1 point? I'm sure there's a rule saying no, but
he says things that make you go,
Right. Speaking of Doug Flutie, let's talk about the NFL here and where he ended up. Week 17 was a big week of football.
Speaking of Doug Flutie.
Doug Flutie and his Patriots. That's where I want to go with the first one.
That might be the GOAT of our 2 seasons of doing this, the GOAT transition.
Because I wanted to talk about his team that he did the drop kick with, the New England Patriots, knocking off Miami Dolphins and hanging on to the playoff spot right now, clinging on tightly to that 7 seed. We're going to get into the playoff implications on our next episode, but this one was one that it's very frustrating seeing this Dolphins team. Teddy Bridgewater ended up going down with pinky injury that he got on a stiff arm on a pick 6 return. But I mean, they're on their 3rd string quarterback right now. Miami, it doesn't seem like
stud though. Skylar Thompson against practice teamers.
Yes, but it was frustrating because this game was within Miami's grasp somehow when they're on their 3rd string quarterback, but just couldn't get it done. And this Patriots team, man, it does not deserve to get into the postseason, in my opinion, but they're sitting in the driver's seat right now. And what are your thoughts here, Jell, on this game? And does Miami even have a chance in your book?
Well, it sounds like Teddy's going to miss this upcoming week. So no, they just signed Mike Glennon, I believe.
Long neck Glennon.
Yes. I think that this tells you everything that you need to know about the Teddy Bridgewater, Skylar Thompson combo. Raheem Mostert out-received Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle combined in terms of receptions.
Check down city.
Yeah. So it's just it sucks for the Dolphins. They had such an awesome season. They were off to such a promising start, up, with an 8-3 record, and they lose 5 straight. They had at one point been undefeated when Tua would start and finish a game. But those are massive parameters when Tua starts and finishes a game.
Yeah.
What kind of future can you have if you're Dolphins management behind this? You can't go into next season assuming Tua's gonna finish every game. And we've seen that Teddy can't be a legitimate backup given how much he's had to play this year. So, I mean, Mike McDaniel, the head coach, he comes from San Fran. It'd be tempting to go after Jimmy G to be Tua's backup, but well, shit, we've seen Jimmy G just as injury prone as Tua. So then what? I don't see a really clear path for Miami looking forward. I don't know if I want to see the Dolphins in the playoffs because I don't want to see Tua get forced out onto the field. I don't think he should play the rest of this season, even if they do make the playoffs. And I sure as shit don't want to see a Teddy Bridgewater, Skylar Thompson, Mike Glennon combo. That's not a happy meal out there. So I as much as I had been rooting for Miami just because they were so fun to watch to start the season, Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, they had such a sweet. It's like Mike McDaniel just jumped in and immediately changed that team, that offense, along with Tyreek Hill. That helps. But
yeah.
But I don't want to see this team in the playoffs. So and the other frustrating part is that, God damn it, the Patriots might be in. So we're in a lose-lose situation here. I mean, we've got a little bit of hope with the Steelers going forward, but oh, this is ugly, man. This is ugly. This is why, and I said this last week, why we don't need a seventh playoff team. We didn't need a battle for the Commanders to make it in. Of course, they blow it. They can't figure out their quarterback situation. The Lions started off like garbage, as did the Packers. Now it's Seattle started off great, and they're still eligible. It's like we've still got 3 teams eligible for that 7th seed in the NFC. We've got 3 or 4 teams eligible for the 7th seed in the AFC. We don't need a 7th freaking playoff team. None of these teams deserve to make the playoffs.
Yeah, but I guess we'll get into that one right now too. The Packers are one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now, and with that performance against the Vikings, I mean, it was 3:30 Kirk Cousins at his finest. Let's just put it that way. But I mean, the Packers just absolutely dominated Minnesota in all facets of the game in this one, and obviously I haven't seen what the line is. We'll, I'm sure, talk about that one on tomorrow's podcast, but they've, in my book, are heavy favorites against the Lions on Sunday Night Football this week. And they look like they could be a team to worry about a little bit as far as if your team's matched up against them come the playoffs. Now, right now, if the playoffs were to ended, we'd get a nice matchup of them against their arch nemesis in the playoffs, San Francisco 49ers.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say.
So
that's exactly what I was going to say is, yes, they've obviously gotten really hot and very lucky, but at one point, I think they had a 6% chance of making the playoffs. Now they're the favorite to get that 7th seed. Against the Niners. I mean, the Niners outduel the Packers in every position outside of quarterback. Where else do the Niners not win that battle? They're better at offensive line, way better defensive line, including the pass rush. Linebackers, Fred Warner versus an injured I don't even know if Devondre Campbell's back. Rookie Quay Walker. Defense, I guess you got Jair Alexander, but it's not like that Niners secondary is a bunch of slouches. Offensively, it's pretty obvious who has the wide receiver depth in terms of, well, or I guess I should say pass catchers when you consider Kittle, Samuel, Ayuk, Joshua Jennings. has been a nice complementary receiver as well. And we know what Christian McCaffrey can do. I guess you could say a push at running back when you've got the AJs of Green Bay versus CMC, and then Aaron Rodgers versus Purdy. I think we all trust Rodgers in that situation more, but the Packers have had the talent advantage and still lost the last 2 seasons to the Niners. So yeah, if that's the way that things shake out, cool. That's cute that Green Bay snuck into the 7th seed. Whatever. Oh shit. What a freaking weekend. It's just God, it was just exhausting but amazing. I guess next game I want to touch on and is Raiders Niners. Let's stick with the Niners, I guess.
Yeah.
Raiders they had just benched Derek Carr earlier in the week. In steps Jarrett Stidham, 4th-year quarterback. He'd been with Josh McDaniels his whole career. And the Raiders took the Niners to OT, both teams going into OT with 34 points. That's a lot. That's a lot of points for both teams to put up. I mean, great for Purdy for putting up that many points. Again, Mr. Irrelevant. And Jarrett Stidham in his first career start going in there and taking arguably the best team in football to overtime. Really impressive. But I want to stick with Derek Carr and just kind of the way that the Raiders treated him. I mean, unless this was all manufactured by Derek Carr, which I can't imagine it was. I don't believe it was, at least at the beginning. He's done so much for your damn franchise. This franchise that has been in just since he got there and since before he was there, just been an absolute train wreck. We've mentioned their first round picks, how you've got guys in jail for murder, for vehicular homicide. You've got a guy that got cut because he was just talking about killing somebody with his assault weapons on an Instagram story. Like, in Damon Arnett, like, what are you doing? Josh Jacobs, they declined his 5th-year option. That, I think we've discussed that seems like a mistake at this point.
Yeah.
Given that I believe he's still leading the NFL in rushing yards. Alex Leatherwood got cut by the Raiders. I believe he was also cut by the Bears.
He's been hurt off and on this season. I think he's still on the roster, but he hasn't really.
Regardless,
much,
he's useless. Yeah. And Cleveland Farrell, their number 4 overall pick in the same draft with Josh Jacobs. Terrible pick. They could have had Devin White in that draft. They went Cleveland Farrell. So just awful management, awful drafting by these Raiders. And Derek Carr has been able to keep that team together. And they got Devontae Adams only because of Derek Carr. And for them to say, hey, we're going to bench you for these next 2 years. And you know what's behind that is that they want to trade him this offseason. And if he gets injured, they can't trade him. If he were to get injured in these last 2 games, they can't. He's untradeable.
Guaranteed his contract.
Right. So the Raiders are just covering their ass. And I feel like Derek Carr's done so much for this franchise for them to just go CYA and like, they're not doing him solid. And if I'm a free agent, unless the Raiders are willing to way overpay me versus other squads, I don't want to go play for that franchise. Like it's a freaking mess and it's an embarrassment. And for them to treat somebody, their franchise quarterback who's been there for a decade or just about a decade like this, it shows really poor taste. It's rubbed me the wrong way. I was thinking about doing a quick Instagram live of car thoughts in the car while I'm in the car. I didn't do it because, well, Dallas drivers. But I don't know. It just rubs me the wrong way so hard, and I hope Derek Carr finds a way. I feel like almost any situation outside of the Commanders is a better situation than this for him.
Yeah, I mean, does this surprise you from the Raiders organization doing
It
something like
can't.
this though? No, it doesn't. But it's one of those that I think you brought in Josh McDaniels as the head coach last year, and maybe something was said behind closed doors like, all right, Derek Carr's here for this year, but I'm going to have somebody else come in and run the offense that I want to run. And Derek Carr's not in our future plans, which is very crappy because, like you said, he's been awesome both on and off of the field for that organization. Now, granted, he hasn't taken them to Super Bowls or anything like that, but he's been serviceable and better than serviceable on the field and deserved way better than this. And again, I think it's just Josh McDaniels wanting a different quarterback to run the offense. But again, could have been handled way different. I get if they do know that they're moving on from him, it makes sense. But at the same time, you can't do that to somebody that's been with the organization that long. And I'm just very curious to see, because you had touched on Devontae Adams wanting to play with Derek Carr. He gets traded to Las Vegas, and what is going to happen with Devontae Adams this offseason? You have to imagine he's not happy that Derek Carr is going to be on his way out after that's the main reason why he wanted to go over to Las Vegas, is play with his former college quarterback. So do you see Devontae Adams making a case to want to get traded again? Is he untradeable at this point? What do you see unfolding this offseason?
I mean, you could get the same return from Green Bay, or what you gave up to Green Bay for Devontae. You could get that same compensation back, I would think. So if Adams says, I'm not playing here, let me go, you could get 2 firsts back, I bet, or a first round swap and an additional swap, or whatever, a first and a second, which is ultimately what Green Bay got. I think you could get that again for Devontae. So he's shown that he hasn't lost a step. He's still freaking awesome. So I wouldn't be surprised if he demands a trade, and maybe he's not saying I need to go pair up with Derek Carr again, because we don't know where Carr is going to be traded. But I would not be surprised if Adams says, why the hell would I want to play here? You just trade. I just came here. You traded away the reason that I was here. Why would I want to come back to this? So I bet you could get another first and second for him and just call it a wash and call this a lost season. I think that's all you can do right now if you're Oakland, or Vegas.
Maybe return to the NFC North for the number 2 overall pick. They could pick up their franchise quarterback, and the Bears could have a wide receiver that's halfway decent.
I'm confused. That'd be a steep price for Devontae, but okay. I mean, Vegas would love it. They could go get themselves a Stroud type. So
yeah,
or Levis or. I guess I got one last thing that I want to touch on really quick. You mentioned the Bears, Justin Fields, who you are saying is a franchise quarterback, and I've been kind of saying the same thing. But this last game, 7 for 21 through the air. I get that he has no receivers. I get that he has no line. I still think he can be a franchise quarterback, but that worries me. 33% completions, and he's sitting out this upcoming weekend. The good old boy, Gruden's boy, Nathan Peterman, getting the start this upcoming weekend. But does that 7 for 21 passing line, that would worry me if I'm a Bears fan, regardless of what he has to throw to.
Yeah, it's concerning. I was watching that game with my dad, and I don't know what to think of it, because it was mind-boggling, some of the passes and some of the play calling that was going on. And I don't know, maybe this is me just seeing through orange glasses, but it seemed like they were trying to tank and lose that game to Detroit. I mean, the last play of the first half, there was like 4 seconds left. They were at the 50-yard line. So you're assuming Hail Mary, right? Detroit was back preparing for a Hail Mary.
Oh,
and they didn't rush any passers at all. And every single one of the Bears receiving options only ran 10 yards down the field. No one went to the end zone at all. Justin Fields ended up throwing a pick on
That was
no
to
pass
Aiden
rushers
Hutchinson.
at all. Yeah, to Aiden Hutchinson. But it was just weird. Like, why wasn't anyone going to the end zone for a Hail Mary? Like, it seemed like Eberflus got the call from upstairs, like, hey, we're gonna lock into that number 2 pick and don't do anything to fuck that up. And that, granted, I mean, 7 for 21 is not great at all, but he looked okay. He did, I don't know, he's sitting out this week, they said, with a hip injury. I'll assume that is what it is. He did look like he was laboring a little bit on the sideline after that huge run that he had in that first quarter. He had the gun out, massaging his quad and everything too. So you could see he didn't look right after that. But I'm just kind of throwing this game out. And like I said, you can call me out for wearing orange glasses or whatever, but I don't know. Something was just goofy with this one, and I'm curious to see what the game in Minnesota looks like too. But I almost think that they're locked in on that 2 pick, and maybe even the 1 is if Houston and the Colts battle it out this weekend, and Houston does something stupid.
So Houston if they end up blowing that number 1 overall pick.
Right. All right. I think that is it. Wrap up this episode. Again, I appreciate everybody out there listening. We'll be back with you tomorrow to preview the national championship and talk week 18 of the NFL season, our final Drew locks of the regular season. We'll get into in a couple weeks here what we're going to be doing for the playoffs. And it is the return of our golf pick'em and golf segment. So excited to talk a little golf with you tomorrow. We can be found at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out on Facebook at Dead Arm Sports. Go to YouTube, type in Dead Arm Sports, subscribe, click the bell. That way you know when our live episodes drop. You can watch the replay of our live episodes the day after as well. We monitor the chat. You can ask us any questions there. If you want to hit us up outside of our live feeds, we can be found at Dead Arm Sports on all of our social media platforms. Gel can be found at Das Gel. I can be found at Das JPEG. Hit us up there. Subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Send us a screenshot of your review. Get you some swag. What are those listening platforms, Gel?
Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Pods. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review on whatever your chosen listening platform is. That written review is very important for us to help us shoot us up the sports podcast rankings. So make sure you do that. And with that written review, send it to us on our social media DMs at Dead Arm Sports on Twitter or Instagram, or just search Dead Arm Sports on Facebook to find us there to send that review. Also on YouTube, as Josh mentioned, just search Dead Arm Sports. Hit that notification bell and subscribe there as well.
Again, thoughts, prayers go out to Damar Hamlin. Hopefully we get some good news here in the coming days. And again, we'll be back tomorrow with a fun-filled episode for you. Joe, close her out.
Well, just one quick MLB hot stove note. The Brewers sign a 1-year deal with Wade Miley.
Former Cubby.
A Dead Arm Sports news note. Your boy Das Gel hit on his betting nugget of the week by taking the Broncos at plus 13.5 with Denver only losing by 3. Listen to my nuggets. And to just to finish it out on a with some more personal thoughts, obviously heart goes out to Damar Hamlin, the family, and we hope that by the time this podcast releases, that we all hear some more encouraging news. Signing off.